Hello, welcome back. This is part of the JordanCon online content. This is Ryan Sesney. I'm the current director of the gaming track, and I'm here with a guest today. If you'd be so kind to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Brian Lane. By day, I am a physics faculty member at the University of North Florida, and by night, I write supplemental third-party content for Pathfinder Second Edition.
Yep. And on a personal note, you're also local to me, so I've had
Yeah,
the pleasure to meet you a number of times in person. And what is it? Although I'm familiar with your attendance in Jordan Con in the past, as I'm the one who carpooled up
I believe you
with you.
gave me a ride. Yes.
Yeah, this is a bit more intimate than I usually get with guests because we were in a car for like 8 hours together. But
16 if you count both ways.
oh yeah. Well, I think it was longer on the way up because of the Atlanta traffic getting
Oh, there was
into.
that horrific traffic, and we saw. I hope it turned out to be a prosthetic arm in the road, but there was something weird in the road on our way there, if I remember.
Yeah, like we never got the other end of that story.
Yeah.
What is it? I hope it was a prop too. But yeah, to get a little bit back on track. So you have a book of archetypes that is coming out for the Pathfinder Second Edition. What is it? You want to tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. So the book I'm titling Fantastic Careers because I wanted to create some player options that would give you the feeling that your character has a job in a way that maybe a class is a bit too generic for. So I've got archetypes for fortune tellers, chefs, teachers, pilgrims on their way to some holy site. So just the thing that you are doing with your life besides adventuring that also comes in and dovetails with your adventuring life. For folks who are unfamiliar, an archetype is something that kind of gets bolted onto your class in the game. So, by the base rules, archetype feats can replace your class feats. But there's a very popular variant called the free archetype rule where everybody just gets a separate track for their archetype and it doesn't deplete their usual feats that they get. And that's been a very popular option. Um, and I wanted to give some options for players to use both in and out of combat to kind of give your character that extra dimension of, you say that your character is an artist. Well, what does that mean that they do? So most are tied to the character's background. There's another class mechanic called the background that describes what you did before you started adventuring, and these archetypes kind of allow you to explore that background more in real time. I should also say that many also include a new game element that I'm calling story feats that your GM can just award you when you reach a certain milestone. So, say, for example, you take the Holy Pilgrim archetype, or you're on your way to a site that is important to your character's faith. Well, something should happen when you get there, right? Because hopefully at some point you get to that site in your adventure. And so when you actually get there and complete whatever kind of rite your GM wants you to, your GM can say, oh, there's this free feat here in the book. You now have that. And so it's just a neat way to kind of blend the story and the mechanics a little bit more.
I got you. One of the handy things about that particular edition in general is archetype is such a commonly used term in terms of story writing, so I feel that that's a very natural language. I'm a big fan about the terminology and basically the way that that can very organically build onto a character. So let's do a little bit of an exercise here using some of your material just to show it off. Obviously, Wheel of Time fan. How would we make a player character that basically is Matt from Wheel of Time?
I'm sure there are hundreds of variations on this on the internet. I'm sure that's a first type of character people try to make. Starting with the basis, starting with ancestry, I would go halfling. I know Matt is a human, obviously, but he is from the Two Rivers, which is the Wheel of Time equivalent of the Shire story wise. So maybe it works. The reason we're going halfling, though, is to get a couple of important things at first level. First is we can pick the gutsy halfling heritage, which improves Matt's saves against emotion effects. So we want Matt to we want to start building up his luck, right? And then at first level, we can take the halfling luck ancestry feat where we get to re-roll a failed check. You get to do this re-roll on a failure, but you have to take the second result even if you get a critical failure. And nothing to me says Matt more than I'm going to press my luck in the situation, and it might go even worse than it did. That feat's also going to be important because at higher levels, that will open up more luck feats down the line. Looking over his background, I was initially going to go with the gambler background. That seems pretty obvious, but then in the Advanced Player's Guide, I found this rare background called Returned. I'll just read the text to you. A little bit of spoilers from Matt here, obviously. You died and miraculously returned with knowledge of the realms beyond death and a stronger link to life. Some dead and undead souls might feel a strange instinctual kinship with you. That to me sounds like Matt. You end up with a feat that makes it harder for you to die. And flavor-wise, you get an additional feat for Boneyard lore, which is the Paizo-specific afterlife. I would probably haggle with my GM to turn that into past life lore. I think that probably is pretty equivalent. For a class, I think we're going to go Swashbuckler. Swashbuckler from the Advanced Player's Guide is defined as being in a state of panache. So you are either in panache or not in panache, and your abilities change depending on which state you're in. And we're going to reflavor this as anytime Matt is in panache, the dice are rolling in his head. And when he ends his panache to do something cool, that's when the dice stop rolling. So we're just reflavoring the mechanic there a little bit. As far as the subclass or the path, I think we're going to go Wit, which gets Matt trained in diplomacy. The only other option I could think of would be for Matt to be trained in intimidation, but I always think of Matt as more clever than scary. But also that diplomacy is going to be important because at first level, we're going to take the feat One for All, which allows you to work better with your allies. So this is kind of bringing in Matt as the general kind of early on there. And before we get too far into feats, the thing we absolutely have to negotiate with our GM if we're going to build Matt, we have to play with some sort of crit deck, right? Where if you get a critical success or critical failure, you draw a card and it gives you an extra effect. I think that's the perfect way to represent Matt's life as a Taviran, is to just add in those extra effects, get those from the get-go. For second level, we're going to go with a feat called Charmed Life. It gives you a boost to some of your saves, or gives you a reaction that you can use with your saving throws. And this is a prerequisite for an 18th level feat called Incredible Luck. So we're just anything that is at all luck flavored or lets us change a saving throw, we're going to go for that because this is Matt's Taviran nature. Then at fourth level, if my GM allows me to use some third-party content, we're going to use the up-and-coming Jolly Gambler dedication in Fantastic Careers. The idea of the Jolly Gambler is that you like to gamble, but you're not doing it so that you can swindle other people out of their money or because you have some sort of compulsion to gamble. It's because you just enjoy the game. To you, life is a game. That's going to open up a sixth level Jolly Gambler feat called Hedge Your Bets, where you can, actually, let me pull the text up for that. I have it open. Okay, yeah. So that's going to open up for at level, 6. That's going to open up at level 6. We're going to take the Jolly Gambler feat Hedge Your Bets, where you spend an action to assess a foe's likely course of action that they're going to take, and you plan your contingencies accordingly. So this is kind of Gambler Matt, kind of General Matt getting blended together. What happens is you attempt a melee strike against a creature, and the strike gains a failure effect. If you fail, not critically fail, but if you fail, you can then attempt to feint against the target or steal from the target as a free action. And you can attempt this steal action even though you're not in combat. I had to add that fine print. So basically, Matt says, oh, I meant to miss, and now I'm going to look like I meant to miss, and so I'm going to feint, or I'm going to try to pickpocket from the person I'm attacking there. And then the last detail I'll give at 8th level, we're going to go back over to Swashbuckler and take Vivacious Bravado. This was a really interesting one. We're going to reflavor this one as well. So the text for Vivacious Bravado, your ego swells, granting you a temporary reprieve from your pain. So the requirement is you gained panache this turn, so you've entered, so the dice have started rolling in Matt's head. You gain temporary hit points equal to your level plus your charisma modifier that lasts until the start of your next turn. And we're going to reflavor this as those bloody memories coming up in Matt's head, and they're kind of getting him swept along in battle. And just for fun, we're going to impose a penalty that for the rest of that turn, Matt has to talk in the old tongue. And
Nice.
so with just a few flavor tweaks here and there, we can really get the swashbuckler, jolly gambler feeling like Matt.
Oh yeah. The good thing about Pathfinder is there's a lot of detail to it, and yeah, you can make a lot of things like that with just like simple reflavorings. That's a really good one as far as that goes.
Yeah, the basic design rule is the first sentence of each feat is something flavorful.
Yeah.
And so if you want to say, I like the mechanics, but I'm not really doing this, yeah, you can just change that flavor thing. And as long as you're not like, as long as you're not obviating some rule like, well, you and the creature have to share a language to do this, you're
Yeah.
you're fine.
No, I feel you there. Let's go the opposite way. We want a villain, and we're gonna make him like a PC, just to make him a bit more hardy, more interesting. Because we're gonna have him like come in and out a couple times. Let's do a Trolloc. Maybe more of a general type, let's say.
Yeah, so for a Trolloc, if I'm the GM and I'm wanting to bring in a Trolloc, the thing I would start with one of the were creatures. Pathfinder is infamous for its wide variety of were creatures, werewolves, were rats, were bears, were they had were insects in one book in first edition. So I'd start maybe with the were bear. I think it's a level 5 creature. Excuse me, it's level 4. Yeah, the werebear is level 4. It's listed as being lawful good because it's like this forest guardian, but you can reflavor alignment. There's usually not an issue there. So we're going to start with the werebear. We're going to make it evil, obviously. I think we're going to have to lower its intelligence and wisdom. By the base stats, the werebear gets an int of modifier of +1 and a wisdom modifier of +3. That really does not sound too much like a Trolloc, so we maybe drop those a little bit. We've also obviously got to drop any of its shape-changing moon frenzy, because that's definitely tied to the were creature mythology. The thing we're going to have to do, though, that's going to be interesting, if we want to get the Trollocs from book 1, where they are trying to capture the Two Rivers gang and not kill them, is we need to design a catch pole. Right. So I'm thinking this is a weapon that, so it's long, right? It needs to be long so that they can get the kids at a distance. So we're going to give it reach. So we're going to give it an extra 5 feet of reach with this thing. So you can grapple a creature with reach. And maybe we make it deal damage upon a successful grapple and anytime somebody attempts to escape, right? The other thing, as I had to review the Trolloc ecology in preparation for this. One of the things is that Trollocs are rather weak on their own. Like a standard fighter can go toe to toe with a single Trolloc and usually be fine. It's when they're in a pack that they're more dangerous. So we need some kind of ability to factor in how they're more dangerous in a group. So I was thinking something like it. Maybe if you have a band of 3 or more of them together, a really basic way to do that would be they get a bonus to their damage and their AC. Maybe if they're in a group of 3 or more, they can give each other actions or something. So like this Trolloc that's at the far end spends 2 actions to give the Trolloc that's going toe to toe with Rand an extra action, something like that. We'd have to come up with some kind of mechanic that boosts them in a group. We might go, for example, to the Hag's Coven ability as a base for that, because when you get 3 or more Hags in a coven together, they all immediately go up a level. They get access to extra spells, and they have this extra set of abilities that come in. So we could probably do like a martial coven for the Trollocs, something like that.
It's a really interesting angle to take. I would not have thought about using the hag rules with that, but yeah, that makes a lot of sense because, as you said in the books, what is it? A single Trolloc goes down, with a sideways glance, but you get 5 or more in a group, and you've got a serious problem here.
Yeah, another thing we might do if we really want to kind of beef them up, we can also incorporate their weakness to fear, right? Because they are incredibly cowardly creatures. They really have to be driven hard by their Murdril to even, to even stay organized. So we might make them weak to fear effects. If they become frightened, you increase the frightened value by 1, or it takes them 2 rounds to go down a frightened value or something like that.
I see. I see. Yeah, that's a really good touch too. What is it? They really feel like if you've ever seen the like animated Lord of the Rings cartoon to where like they
Mm-hmm.
they have that that song that the orcs sing,
Yes. Oh, what is that? Oh, I had that in my head just a month ago.
where there's a whip, there's a way.
Oh, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that seems like a Trolloc song there. Like,
Yeah, I mean, you can even specifically make them weak to whips, or when they take damage from a whip, they become frightened or something like that. Because that's one of the fun things you can do is you can add in these specific triggers that the players don't necessarily know about. And so when the player asks information about them or rolls a successful recall knowledge on them, they get this really cool, flavorful piece of information, and they can't wait to tell all of the other players about it.
oh yeah. What is it? It's also a good way to incorporate some of the knowledge skills and such into what is it? Some of the actual gameplay because a lot of
Yeah.
the depending on how you play, like a lot of the knowledge skills can kind of be less useful. And I mean,
Yeah.
since it's a fundamental way that you're building the character, I like to bring stuff in that, up to the forefront because I mean if you put ranks in something like knowledge and what is it dungeoneering or something like that
Mm-hmm.
and like your GM never like calls for those roles, it's just
Yeah.
like, well, why did I waste these points?
Yeah. Well, it's also interesting because like your knowledge skills can overlap. Where it's like let's say you're trying to recall knowledge on a Trolloc. Well, a Trolloc is going to have a humanoid trait, so I can roll society to learn about its culture, the tribes, how they behave. But if I want to know, are they poisonous, or do they carry any disease that I need to be worried about? That's going to be a nature check. Because that's going to come from their animal side. Um, they are this unholy abomination. So maybe I roll some kind of magical recall knowledge to understand, what their weaknesses are. And so one of the fun things you can do as a GM is, everybody at the table is going to have some different knowledge skill that they are invested in. And so you can just say, okay, for this person, I'm going to give this information. And for this person, I'm going to give this information. So the players are collaborating even when they are just remembering things about this creature.
Oh yeah, and what is it? Especially if your players are more of the planning type. Basically, after you run into like something like this the first time, and you're like, holy cheese, guys, we barely survived that one. We really need to come up with a plan for how to
Yeah.
deal with these guys in the future.
The thing I want to get better at as a GM is signaling ahead of time what kind of creature that they're going to be seeing next. Where it's like, oh, you see these tracks, and you know that they look like wolf tracks, but it's weird. It's almost like the wolf is on its hind legs,
Hmm.
And then, oh, you hear these rumors in town about this creature with a bird face or something like that, And it's like they can start to triangulate what that is. Another fun thing to do if you have veteran players who have read the monster books way too much, they start to say, oh yeah, it's this thing, I know its weaknesses, etc. You can always just reskin it, right? So you can say, oh, like let's say you have them running into a hydra, and they fought hydras too many times, they know about its heads growing back. Well, maybe it's not a big dragon snake like thing with 20 heads. Maybe it's a giant spider with 20 legs, and the only way to kill it is to cut off the legs, but the legs might grow back. You're just replacing one set of description for another. The numbers are all still the same, so you're not having to rebalance everything. And suddenly your veteran players don't know what's going on anymore.
Oh yeah. It's handy to not have to reinvent the wheel for a lot of these things.
Yes.
Going into where the conversation is heading anyway. If you've noticed, I've given you prompts basically from the Wheel of Time.
Yeah.
So,
Imagine
you know,
that.
why ever would I have a bias towards that intellectual property? Huh. But how would you take a more established property, especially with the lore that Pathfinder comes with, and try to make that more of a Wheel of Time feel, basically for people at home who are doing their own home games.
Mhm.
Obviously there are IP issues that I'm not necessarily advocating that publish material for,
It's
but
just in-house stuff, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. So without completely reinventing the Pathfinder system,
Hmm.
um, how would you start to make the world feel a bit more like the Wheel of Time?
Yeah, yeah. So the first thing I would do as far as combat goes, there's an alternate rule set in the game mastery guide called Proficiency Without Level. So basically, in Pathfinder 2e, as long as you are trained or better in something, be it attack rolls, skill checks, saving throw, whatever, all those numbers go up by one every level because you add your level to everything. Your monsters are also adding their level to everything, and so it's like your abilities and their difficulties are kind of scaling like this, but that's what makes this level monster harder and this level monster easier. That works out well for for kind of sending the message home that, oh, you as a first level player do not want to go after the frog hemoth, but you as a 10th level PC do not need to worry about the 0 level goblin tribe that is around the corner, right? You can make quick work with them without even having to have a combat. What proficiency with that level does is it kind of takes that spread and squishes it all together. And they even, in that section of the GMG, give the example of, let's suppose you're in a rule where it doesn't make sense for even the greatest swordsman in the world to be able to go to stand against 6 opponents all going against him at the same time, which is literally a line from, I think, Lord of Chaos. And so they had that kind of world in mind when they were doing this system. So that's the first thing I would do, because that makes it a little bit grittier. It's like there's a little bit more danger around every corner if even 6 novices can come gang up on you when you're higher level. So that's the first thing I would do. I think that would bring in the more realism that the Wheel of Time is built on. The other thing we have to think about is what to do with the magic system. And this is true for most
Yeah,
D20 system, because I don't know that channeling and casting spells from spell slots is quite the same thing.
no.
Um, I've heard it said that Aes Sedai are really more like kineticists, in the sense that they just get to blast things off, but they're getting tired while they do it. And so there's a much more frequent discharge recharge cycle. So the way I might do that in Pathfinder 2e, I might expand the focus point system, because the focus spells are kind of a compromise between, you have so many spells per day, and once you're done, you're done, and the cantrips that you can just spam all day. It's really, you have some number of focus points. It caps out at 3, and each focus spell costs you 1 focus point. And so if you're at the top of your game, you can do 3 of these really cool, unique, class-specific, usually, spells, and then you have to rest for 10 minutes.
Hmm.
And after you rest and refocus for 10 minutes, you come back and you've got your focus spells back. So what I might do to kind of compromise on that, because the mechanics of the spells are great. We've even got, you could probably come up with a mapping of, which of the 5 powers is involved in each spell. What I might do with that, though, would be just expand the focus point rules. Make every spell cost 1 focus point, maybe 2 if it's your maximum level, and give folks more focus points. Like, say you can reach a cap of 6 or 7 instead of 3. I think that would give the better dynamic of of the Aes Sedai or the Ashaman. I'm going to expend all my energy now. Okay, now I'm going to get my energy back, and I'm going to expend it again in some grand display.
Well, and let me ask you this, kind of
Yeah.
relating to it. What is it? Would you necessarily think it would be prudent to make specific features for, like, a red Aja versus
Mm,
a green Aja?
that is a great question.
Yeah. Well, what is
I
it?
wonder, I wonder if that's a good way to do the free archetype rule. Would be, okay. So you want to be Aes Sedai,
Hmm.
and let's say you're doing that through, maybe you're doing it through sorcerer, maybe you're doing it through. It's hard to imagine mapping a prepared spellcasting class. to Aes Sedai because Aes Sedai are just, oh, I know how to do this, so I can do it anytime. Um,
Well, even though
yeah.
basically they all have the same capabilities, there are definitely focuses that certain
Yeah.
Aes Sedai have over other ones.
Yeah, yeah. Now that I think about it, I think probably that would be a great archetype track to have because you can pick your class based on the type of spells you want to cast,
Yeah,
right? Or the type of extra things you want to have. But then your archetype represents that secret knowledge that your Aja gives you, right?
right.
So there's the tricks that only the blues know, or the greens get maybe some extra weapon proficiency or something. Um, that you could flavor that on, but you don't have to make a version of that for every possible spellcasting class that you choose.
Yeah. I think that you could do a lot with that, and especially if you what is it? If you included even like, Black Aja in there basically
Yeah,
for, potential
scheming.
yeah,
Yeah. Oh
that
gosh,
that that seems like a
how the wheels
great
are turning.
political character, like a political caster. I do
Yeah,
love
that would be
those.
cool. I'm trying to remember. I don't think in the main story the Ashaman ever developed something akin to Aja's, but you would probably want to create something flavorful for them as well.
Right.
Maybe you set your adventure in the Fourth Age, and yeah, they've been around long enough to develop that stuff. On the other side of it, the other thing we'd want to do for the Blade Masters, we would want more. We would want to incorporate all those great stances that the books describe, right? And there is a stance mechanic in Pathfinder 2e. It mostly goes to the monks, so we'd want to port that over again, maybe as like maybe an archetype track or something that any combat focused class could
I
bring in.
I would make an argument though, in the Wheel of Time specifically though, any Blade Master is basically like a monk that studies
Yeah.
swordsmanship.
Yeah. So maybe you make maybe you give some monk options that are specifically sword focused. There is some monastic weapon stuff. I'm not the expert on monks that I should be, but I don't know that I don't remember whether you focus on a specific weapon like that. That would be cool to do though.
Yeah, that would be cool. What is it? You're getting me excited about the potential there. But what is it? Just to rein this back a little bit. As far as this goes, obviously you want to use the rules that are there to make it a little bit easier on yourself because the more stuff you can use that's already there, the more balanced it'll be, the more what is it? The less work you have to do. Can you think of anything that is more or less a pitfall to this sort of thinking with a lot of the rule sets? You had mentioned before that maybe straight level, basically two attack bonuses might not necessarily be the best for a property like that because it's more realistic and you don't want, one guy to be able to like blow through six swordsmen no matter what level. What other things do you see as a potential problem?
Yeah, so thinking about this from the perspective of at the table, right? Because that's where this really comes to a head is player wants to do something cool. GM either doesn't see where it is in the rules or sees a rule that kind of goes against what the player wants to do. The thing I would always try to address would be, are the rules themselves the trouble, or are the rules just highlighting a difference in expectation, either between players or between the GM and the player? Because you can absolutely adjust the rules, right? I mean, they're modularized so that you can say, okay, we're not playing with this thing, or we're going to play with this thing, but we're going to tweak it. But even if you make that adjustment, if you don't address that difference in expectation, you're just going to run into that conflict later. And so I understand some folks, will run into an issue in the rules that they do believe needs to be adjusted, but I sometimes think that's a proxy for difference in expectations. As far as specifically going to Wheel of Time setting, the only other pitfall I really see, and I'm not putting down the Wheel of Time as an IP, and I'm not putting down the amazingly rich Wheel of Time RPG that came out a couple decades ago now, I think.
Sure.
But the world of the Wheel of Time really does not have a very rich ecology of creatures. So, like, if I go to make a bestiary of Wheel of Time creatures, I'm going to have, what, a dozen varieties of Trolloc, I'm going to have the seemingly unending list of Shanshan creatures, but they're only going to be around when the Shanshan are around. And then I'm going to have a host of weird things coming out of the Blight, but again, they're only going to be in the Blight. So for most of the world that you're looking at, you're mostly going to have Trollocs, Fades, and humanoids, right? Like like you would have to bake in some additional lore to get you a greater variety of creatures, right? Like, oh, Agonor's vault has been opened, and all of his prototypes of creatures from the Age of Legends are on the loose. And that could be your excuse for getting all this stuff. But it's not going to feel like the Wheel of Time story that we read, right? The Wheel of Time story that we read is primarily about people, right? I mean, there's even the huge chunk of books where the Trollocs go away, and it's literally just about getting all these people together. And so maybe that means that to really give it a Wheel of Time feel, you incorporate more social encounters. You incorporate more intrigue rather than
The
okay,
great game.
yeah, I know, right? I mean, maybe you take some of these social encounter rules and you beef those up to get your game of houses going on.
I'm into it. What is it? I have a special place for any kind of investigative or
Oh yeah,
social game. Those are always fun because as a player, I usually appreciate the puzzle solving aspect
yeah.
of it. So like if you give me like, oh this stone door like a rune lights up when you like come close to it, I'm like, okay, let's hunker down. What is this doing?
So
What does
I'll
the
pose
room look like?
I'll pose you a question. When you say you like the puzzle solving, who's doing the puzzle solving? Are you the player solving the puzzle, or is your character solving the puzzle?
Well, in that context, it usually depends on the system.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot that basically, what is it? There are some that basically mechanically are resolved themselves. For instance, ICRPG, like it's literally an intelligence check,
Mm-hmm.
and like what is it? You apply basic effort, which is basically the you roll a d4 and it has like a hit point value basically, and it's just like, you know, your character is sitting there trying to figure out the riddle of the store while something else is happening that is basically going to be very bad if you don't solve it within a time point. At the other end of that spectrum, like especially for like the first edition like D&D stuff, like they expected like your DM would hand you like, a cipher and it'd
Yeah,
be like, okay, solve this. Like
yeah.
those are the two extremes. And most systems fall somewhere in between there. For a Pathfinder game, I think it's I think the system can support both depending on what the players
Yeah.
tend to enjoy. And for me at least, um, I enjoy the ones to where, the DM's just like, okay, there's a glowing rune on the door whenever you walk by it, and I'm like, okay, well, what's the room look like? What else is happening when I
Yeah.
stand near the door? Is there, uh, what's the temperature in the room? Is there an acrid smell? Is
Is
there
there
a charred
laughter?
is there a charred skeleton reaching out as though he were like going towards a doorknob?
Yeah, I think a great compromise on that is things like the characters are getting the information. Like, oh, you remember this guy did this thing in his life, and oh, that this culture values this thing, or that the bridges in this city are all red, or something like that. But you have to let the players be the one to put those pieces together to actually solve it. So it's like the information's coming out of the world. So it's not like you're stopping the game to give them the riddle of the Sphinx or something,
Yeah.
but you're giving them pieces from the game that then the players, have to put together.
Oh yeah. What is it? What is it? One of my favorite variations of this is basically the kind of the murder mystery.
Yeah.
Like, you walk into a room, you find the archdeacon is dead, and what is it? You find bloody footprints leading to the window, and you go out to the window, and the footprints trail off till halfway down the ledge, and then there's just nothing there. How did this happen? How did they gain entrance? There's no sign of forced entry. That kind of thing. A trail of clues basically has a special place in my heart simply
Yeah.
because it it gets the players into the mindset of the characters like the fastest, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like a mystery is something. It doesn't have to be the focus of an adventure, but you can put a mystery in nearly any adventure,
Oh
and
yeah.
it's an excellent addition.
And what is it? Relating this back to kind of the plot structure of the Wheel of Time, like one of the things in the Eye of the World that keeps you going is the constant sense of mystery because
Yeah,
you have the vaguest sense of idea of why these boys are being chased.
yeah.
I feel like that's like a great adventure hook to start off a
hmm
campaign to where like it's, you know, well, these monsters are chasing you and you don't know why.
The the thing I love more than anything, and my goal every RPG session, I want my players between sessions to be theorizing about what the heck is going on.
Mm.
Right. So I want to see them messaging each other. I want to see them calling me and saying, I think so and so is the bad guy, or I think that item we picked up is cursed. And I just listen to it like, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And of course, any good GM will listen to those. They'll listen to those 5 theories, pick the craziest one, and suddenly that one is true. Right.
Was Claudia von Hammerstein the whole
Yeah.
time?
It certainly was now. But it reminds me of the days back when we had to wait for Wheel of Time books to come out. And I would be on dragonmount.com on the forums, and people would be sharing all these crazy theories, but they had this evidence and it all tied together.
Oh yeah.
And every once in a while, one of them would turn out to be right.
Honestly, even if it, how can I phrase it? I enjoy good literature, obviously, but even if you do that with subpar, it has an extra element to that. I
Yeah.
do love the interaction with that.
Yeah.
Not to name names, but there's a series that I've been following for a while that I'm ashamed to admit publicly. It's so bad, but the thing that's kept me interested in it is like, okay, get out my conspiracy board and like, with the red yarn, it's like, okay, this guy, he said this in book 3, but like, that doesn't seem to match what he said in book 2.
Yeah.
What is it? Obviously one came, this one came after that one, so that's not a continuity error. So like, what was he lying then or is he lying now? Oh God, oh God. One thing that I wanted to do with you today, and we'll finish off with this, a little brainstorming session because the gaming track actually is doing a module writing contest right now.
Ooh.
I thought we could, what is it, at least at a high level, not necessarily asking you for numbers, but
Mm-hmm.
let's brainstorm a module adventure idea. Our theme this year is piety and or zealotry, depending on your point of view,
Ooh.
with the Children of Light.
Ooh. Okay.
You are going to want to include this for 3 to 6 players. So, maybe mass combat shouldn't be your first
No,
option.
no.
Um, and what is it? We need at least one combat encounter and at least one social encounter, puzzle, or mystery. So,
Okay, so a combat, a social, and a mystery. All right,
yep.
this is cool. A few questions. Do we have any constraints on setting? Specifically, is this pre-last battle or post-last battle?
Oh, you can set it in Faerun if you want. It isn't
Oh, okay.
necessarily a setting specific idea, but
Oh, okay. So it's just children. Is exploring the theme of the Children of Light,
yeah,
basically.
basically pietry or zealotry has
I
to be
see.
the
Okay.
initial cause.
Okay. If you don't mind, I'm gonna because I was thinking about this prompt last night. I was like, all right, I don't want to write out my answer to this, but I do want to think about like, because we're doing kind of lower level PCs. Is that right?
And
Okay.
up to you.
Up to me. Okay. So I was thinking about, okay, so we need it. We need because you always want to have what is actually going on.
Hmm.
And then you want to have what PCs initially think is going on.
Sure.
Right, right. Because you want to have some kind of progression there. You don't want them to show up to town and say, "Oh, there's a big bad guy in the tower right there. Can you please go deal with them?"
Right.
You want there to be, well, the big bad guy is doing some sort of experiment, and that experiment is causing a problem here, and that causes a problem here, and that eventually trickles down to the village, right? And then you have to, you're basically designing the adventure backwards there. I was thinking for a lower level group, so let's say maybe levels 1 through 5, something like that.
Mm.
I was thinking, what if we had as like the final boss an animal that has become awakened? Right? So they suddenly they wake up in the morning, they become intelligent, they're capable of speech, they become sentient, whatever terms you want to use there. And they want to learn what it means to be an intelligent being. And so the problem that's being created is that they are going into the nearby village and stealing just basically random stuff to try to understand what does it mean to be human, basically. So we'll bring in a little bit of a Star Trek theme there too, I guess. But the townsfolk don't know that it's this creature stealing. They think that they're being stolen from by each other. And so when the PCs arrive in this village, the village is at each other's throats because somebody is stealing something and they don't know who. So to blend that with the piety and zealotry, what if we make it that more specifically this awakened animal is trying to figure out what deity awoke them? And so they are stealing artifacts and holy texts and vestments and things from every temple in town. And every temple is pointing the finger at a different faith. And there's about to be this multi-sided religious war within this town. Maybe we have to make it a larger town or small city to encompass all that. But like there's this inter-temple war that's about to start. And people are either having to choose sides or they're just boarding themselves up in their home because the clerics are about to go to war with each other.
What is it? I like how that's going, and that leads to our combat encounter, and that satisfies our mystery. Basically, what is it? So let's say, for simplicity's sake, 2 sides. We'll work on the details of that later. But basically, we got 2 sides. Basically, the initial inciting incident is the first one gets stolen from, and they see a group of adventurers. Maybe even some of them might be involved in that religion.
Yeah.
What is it? So they go to investigate. That's our first mystery encounter. We'll have like a couple of interactions with PCs that we can get some good role play in. We'll have like a scene to where they can go over some clues and basically come up with a theory. And in keeping with your idea of subverting the expectation, we are going to have like a lot of the clues that basically lead them to believe that it is this other faction.
And I think what we do to maybe bait them a little bit, one of the leaders in that other faction, maybe not the high priest, maybe just somebody that they're more likely to interact with, is a reformed burglar. Or has ties to the underworld or something like that.
I like it. An obvious clue like that will be eaten up by players, so they're going to most likely look at that and say, oh, obviously it's this guy. He's,
Unless you're my players, and then you say, well, that's too obvious, so it must be something else.
Well, I mean...
But they can go either way on that, right? Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's the catch-22 of all role-playing games. You can plan this out as perfectly as you want, but the players will never choose the way you're thinking.
No plan survives first contact with the players.
Exactly.
And I think the way we track this, as this sort of goes back and forth, I would put in some sort of escalation point system where every time the players do something that exacerbates the rift between the 2 factions, like life in the city gets harder, right? So maybe prices go up a little bit. It's harder to find uncommon items. Um, DCs for diplomacy checks go up. But if they can soothe matters, right? If they can get like a temporary truce or something, escalation points go down. They start to be more well thought of throughout the city, and so then they can maybe unlock specific boons and maybe even make a little bit of that necessary to get a specific clue.
Well, and I really like the idea of tying what is it, some sort of like random encounter to basically the
Yeah,
temperature of the city.
yeah,
Basically, so like if you're at a point of like high chaos where tensions are flaring, like you're what is it, you're likely to run into like, 2d6 like guards, like, that'll
yeah,
hassle you. But like if it's at like a low point in the area, you may just run across like a pickpocket or, something minor. Maybe even something useful. Maybe you run into the awakened animal itself. It just doesn't talk to you. You see
yeah,
this, you see a monkey that's just kind of like staring at you, and they're using a fork to eat or something like
yeah,
that. And
yeah,
it's just
yeah.
like one of those, huh, that's strange.
So then we need some excuse for them to start getting out into the wilderness outside the city because we need at some point to draw their attention to this. There might be something else going on here besides these two factions warring against each other. Um, so maybe somebody runs away and they happen to run near the den of this awakened animal, or the awakened animal's former den, right? So they don't run into it; they run into like the place it was living or something. Could always have them, eventually find weird tracks and follow them, right? That's always an easy clue to leave. Um,
What is it? Especially if the tracks have one of the lost holy items,
yeah,
basically.
yeah,
Like they went through with a relic of a seltzer, and
hmm,
basically they get a dog to track the scent of the.
yeah, yeah. That's really cool. I wonder too, like, so this awakened animal is it literally just become sentient and it's like a humanoid soul now in an animal's body, or does it get some extra abilities? Like, could it start reaching out to the minds of the townsfolk with some kind of telepathy or something?
See, what is it? I love having a mystic element to this. So a bunch of the priests having weird dreams.
Yeah.
That
What if okay, so what if we start with the two factions, right, that accuse each other of stealing from each other? This awakened animal starts reaching out to the priests, and they think that this is some new deity calling to them. And so now you have another party from both of these factions come together and unite under the vision of the monkey or something.
Yes. What is it?
Oh, that's cool.
Yes. I think that has legs if we develop it a little bit more. That
Like
seems.
that's clearly like if this thing had say four parts to it, that's definitely like a part three event, I think. To like
Well,
to ramp up the drama.
yeah. In an ideal like structure, you wouldn't want to make the big reveal until like, the act three, as it were.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, that would be like a good one in there, and especially because we're using something that's not really common in the monster manual.
Yeah.
Like a psychic monkey is not necessary. Like it wouldn't be something that they would necessarily see, and it's playing on a lot of expectations for like clerics are getting weird dreams. You think that that's something spiritual when
Yeah.
it's not really. It's
Yeah.
I
Hmm.
would have a lot of fun writing like some of the visions, just because like a priest is having like a vision of a monkey with a third eye,
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Oh
like
man.
he's
And
like
then the
asking it, what is it to be human? What is love? And just
oh
like
my
all these like
gosh,
weird
yes.
surreal questions.
Yeah, there starts to be graffiti around the city with the monkeys' questions.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And then and so I'm just imagining the conversations at the table where the players are like, "Is the monkey a metaphor for something?" No, it's literally a monkey in the forest over there. You find out later.
No, I love it. And I don't know about your players, but my players like what is it? They usually overthink a problem to where like it's like, okay, so obviously it's not a literal monkey asking them
Yeah,
questions.
yeah,
That would
yeah.
be ridiculous. What takes the place of like a monkey's? Okay, so maybe it's like a fey creature because they kind of like they kind of look at like humans as just another kind of animal, so like they wouldn't necessarily be able to see like the difference between a human and a monkey. Maybe it's just like this higher fey being that, and they would I know that they would eat up that line
Yeah,
of
yeah.
questioning and lead to.
I wonder if you could even. Whenever I write an adventure material, I like to leave enough room for the GM to kind of play around with some of the details. I wonder if you could even in the module leave it unspecified what type of animal it is, so that like maybe so that if your players are more inclined to try to diplomatize the awakened animal, maybe you make it something friendly like a monkey. If they're more inclined to grab your torch and pitchfork, you make it an awakened bear, because
Hmm.
obviously a bear is more dangerous than a monkey, right? Or maybe depending on if they're going one way, do you want to subvert their expectations, you turn it to kind of the other extreme, and they have to go diplomatize the awake, or they could diplomatize the awakened bear, or they could go after it in combat. Like I think we want to leave that option. We probably want to leave that option open at the end, I think.
Well, yeah, and you would have to do some what is it? Some careful crafting of the stats because a big dang boss battle uh,
Hmm.
is should be an option,
Yeah,
especially if you
yeah.
have like more uh, violent players who basically want
Hmm.
that sense of relief at the end of the investigation.
Yeah, yeah. Hmm.
I'm thinking that like what is it? You may even want to make like a little maybe a three-room dungeon basically for its den.
Yeah,
It may exert some limited control over like others of its same species, so like
yeah.
it has a couple minions. But I mean, even if it's just like a monkey doing this or something like that, basically the monkey's basically using tactics and things like that. It
Hmm.
helps you get to the point of solving the mystery, and it
Yeah.
also, you know, lends an interesting tactical element to it, to where it's like, hey, wait, did that monkey just try wield a, you know, scimitars? That is not normal monkey behavior.
or why is the monkey using the same why are all the monkeys of the forest using the same flanking structure that we used in this one historical battle that a
Yeah,
book was stolen about? And it's like the monkey is back there reading this history book about all these great battles.
yeah, and
I wonder.
especially if they're stealing holy relics,
Yeah.
like the monkey can now cast cleric spells.
Oh my gosh, yes. The monkey either studies enough and gets cleric spells, or gets enough wands together that he can basically fake his way through being a cleric. So another thing I was thinking of, since we're going to cap this off at a lower level, we could at the end install a hook if we wanted to, which is how did the animal become awakened to begin with, and maybe it's like there's some sort of magical pollution in the area that mutated the monkey and made him awaken, and so it's like you solve the mystery, you resolve the town's issue, but now you have to figure out where the heck this magical radiation came from.
Oh
But
yes.
what I was thinking with that, if we do something to establish the source of the awakening, maybe this animal tries to take more of its kind to the source to awaken them, but it goes wrong,
Oh yeah.
and that becomes your mid-level boss, or one of the minions in the final dungeon is these half awakened, mutated, maybe stronger, maybe they get a little bit of innate spells or something, animals where you're like, okay, we're on the right track with the monkey.
Yeah. No, and I love a module that ends with a hook that can tie into like another adventure. Like
Yeah,
especially if like this doesn't neatly resolve the issue. Like maybe the monkey's awakened because it found a meteor,
yeah.
and just living around this meteor basically caused it to mutate. And
Hmm. And
what
what
is
is
it?
that going to do to the town eventually?
Oh yeah, and I
And
mean,
oh, by the way, even when you deal with a monkey, you still have this social rift, right? So you might go trying to find out where the meteor came from and if anybody else got awakened from the meteor, but now you're emotionally invested in this town
yep.
and you want to make sure that they heal. And so you kind of split your time between adventuring and negotiating a peace treaty.
Well, and what is it? Like I said, I like modules that leave that kind of stuff open because you can go
Yeah.
two completely different ways with it,
Yeah.
and it would lead to an interesting adventure either way. So
Yeah.
I'm really liking the ideas that we're having here. But time is catching up with us.
I suppose it is. Goodness.
Yeah, I'll uh, I'll cut this short by saying, what is it? Where is a place that we can get some of your products, including your archetype book?
Yeah, so I think the archetype book it should be up by the time Jordan Con happens. So by the time people are watching this, it should be available. But you can find me on Drive Through RPG. Just look for Lion's Brain Media. So Brian Lane becomes Lion's Brain. It works.
Sure.
Um, if folks want to follow me personally, they can find me on Twitter at WBrianLane. Brian is with an I. And if folks like me and would like to see my physics stuff, I also have a YouTube channel, Let's Code Physics. It occasionally has RPG related stuff, but it's mostly programming and physics. But if that's something people are interested in, they can also find me there.
All right. Uh, Sounds good, man.
Alrighty.
Thank you for coming. I've enjoyed this conversation immensely. So, what
That
is
was a
it?
lot of fun.
Yeah, hopefully we'll do it again soon.
Definitely.
All right. And with that, sir, have a good day.
Thanks, you too.